Following the events of the civil war known as the Horus Heresy, the detailed records of the traitor Primarchs and the traitor legions were destroyed, while their homeworlds were either destroyed entirely or simply purged of all forms of life, before being renamed and having their locations deleted from Imperial archives. Horus himself, however, is surprisingly well known within the Imperium. Popular myth within Imperial culture describes Horus as being the arch-traitor, a figure akin to the devil of ancient Abrahamic religions, who betrayed the Emperor for his own selfish reasons and lust for power, rather than relaying the true account of Horus being manipulated by the forces of chaos, the existence of which the Imperium strives to keep secret among the populace. Surprisingly, another traitor Primarch is also known by many within the Imperium. And what's even more surprising is that, strangely, they seem to be revered rather than reviled: the Primarch Lorgar Aurelian. Lorgar was the Primarch of the 17th Legion of the Legio Astartes, the Word Bearers, and discovered upon the religious world of Colchis. The Word Bearers were actually the first to fully embrace the ruinous powers, following Lorgar being reprimanded by the Emperor of Mankind for his legion's snail-like pace in enacting compliances upon worlds that had yet to be brought into the Imperium, as well as the Primarch's actions in teaching worlds that had been subjected to compliance by the Word-Bearers into worshipping the Emperor as a god, an act which the Emperor himself despised. However, Lorgar himself has been spoken with reverence by many of the loyal citizens within the Imperium. One such example is detailed in the novel Pandorax, when Lord Admiral Kranswar and his crew fought against the traitor marines of the Black Legion who had boarded his ship, the Revenge.
Had this traitor marine once stood alongside Horus, had he waged war upon noble Terra, doing battle with beings of legend like Sanguinius, Lorgar, and the mighty Russ?
The language used here seems to suggest that the Admiral, and therefore many within the Imperium itself outside the ranks of the Adeptus Astartes, believe that Lorgar had fought against Horus Lupercal, standing alongside Sanguinius of the Blood Angels and Leman Russ of the Space Wolves. But could there have been any reason for this train of thought? This could be due to the fact that, before turning traitor, Lorgar was a zealous worshipper of the Master of Mankind, believing him to be a god incarnate. To this end, Lorgar wrote what would become known as the Lectitio Divinitatus, a book that put forward the idea of the Emperor as a living god. Whenever worlds were made compliant by the Word-Bearers Legion, the Legion would remain following the compliance, to erect temples dedicated to the Emperor of Mankind and to spread the word of the Lectitio Divinitatus. This in turn made the Legion laboriously slow in their conquests during the Great Crusade. However, following Lorgar's admonishment by the Emperor of Mankind, Lorgar ordered all texts that referred to the Emperor as a god to be burned. Lieutenant Commander Menelek, one of the original Imperial Heralds, the name of the Word-Bearers Legion before they were reunited with Lorgar, stated the following in this regard.
The Primarch is right to address his error, but his chastisement came too late. We are already diminished in the eyes of the other legions for our tardy conquests. The necessity for this punishment will lower our standing even further. Perhaps we should even return to be the Imperial Heralds, scour the last of these Colchisian delusions, and make the 17th great again.
Despite the majority of these works being burned, many citizens within the Imperium managed to acquire copies of the Lectitio Divinitatus, with numerous secret cults of worship springing out throughout the course of the Great Crusade and even during the Horus Heresy, such as the Temple of the Saviour Emperor, which would eventually rise to power above all the religious cults and would eventually give rise to the Ecclesiarchy, the organisation that is now the state church of the modern-day Imperium. Due to being the author of the original texts that would give rise to the tenets of the imperial cult, perhaps this is why Lorgar, despite being the first Primarch to fall to chaos, is still seemingly revered. Perhaps the Adeptus Ministorum simply chose not to acknowledge the fact that Lorgar was himself a traitor, perhaps instead claiming that Lorgar died during the Horus Heresy, despite the fact that Lorgar is indeed alive and well, having been elevated to become a demon prince of Chaos Undivided. There wouldn't be many to argue otherwise within the Imperium itself. After all, unlike his brothers Angron, Fulgrim, Magnus and Mortarion, who have all led vast invasion forces of heretic Astartes and demonic creatures, Lorgar has only just emerged from the warp since his apotheosis into demonhood, and so it is easy for the common populace to assume that Lorgar had in fact perished during the Horus Heresy. But this leaves a potentially darker implication to the spread of the imperial cult. Seeing as Lorgar has spent over 10,000 years within his chambers within the Templum Inficio on Sikaris, forbidding anyone to disturb his meditation, could this be due to a ritual that the Demon Primarch might have been undertaking? While the majority of Lorgar's publications were indeed burnt by his own order, Cor Theron, the Legion's first captain and the adoptive father of the Primarch, had indeed managed to save a precious few copies of the texts. Upon the Legion's turn to the worship of chaos, which itself was the basis for the ancient Colchizian religions, Lorgar, who himself was a powerful psyker and sorcerer, could have indeed enacted a contingency plan should Horus's rebellion fail, to spread a religion seemingly dedicated to the Emperor of mankind. However, in actuality, these texts penned by Lorgar could in fact be an extremely subtle form of manipulation through the religious tenets penned within the Lectitio Divinitatus, or at least a revised version of, in order to spread galactic-wide worship of the ruinous powers. This could explain as to why Lorgar spent over 10,000 years in his chambers in deep meditation, in order to act as some kind of psychic conduit to channel the prayers and reverent devotion of Imperial citizens into actually powering the Chaos Gods, or even himself to become an actual Chaos God as opposed to the Emperor. While this seems indeed a likely plan the subtly manipulative Primarch could indeed undertake, this plan itself could have really only worked until after the events of the Age of Apostasy at the end of M36. For following the death of the maniacal ecclesiarch Gog Vandire, the imperial cult was subject to reform by the preacher Sebastian Thor and his Confederation of Light. This would mean that many, if not all, of the Demon Primarch's manipulations and subliminal messages within the tenets of the Lectitio Divinitatus would have been removed following the religious reform that the Imperium itself underwent. But given that Lorgar could have channeled at least 5 millennia worth of faith within him, or at least through him to the Chaos Gods, then that would mean his plan was not a complete and total failure. What do you think? Was the Imperial cult all part of Lorgar's grand plan? Or is it all coincidental? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.